Ernesto Guevara was born in Rosario, Argentina in 1928 into a family with a mix of aristocratic roots and a strong social conscience. From a young age, he was a curious and intelligent boy, but his life was marked by a constant struggle with severe asthma. This illness, however, did not hold him back. Instead, it seemed to fuel a powerful determination within him to overcome any obstacle. His parents encouraged his wide-ranging interests, from poetry and philosophy to chess and rugby. This intellectual and physically demanding upbringing shaped a young man who was not content with accepting the world as it was, but was always questioning the structures and inequalities he saw around him. The seeds of his revolutionary spirit were planted not in grand political halls, but in the quiet, book-filled rooms of his family home. His formal education led him to study medicine at the University of Buenos Aires. It was during his time as a medical student that his worldview began to dramatically expand beyond the confines of his own privileged life. He was not just interested in treating individual ailments, but started to see the larger, systemic sicknesses affecting society, particularly the widespread poverty and exploitation that plagued so much of the continent. He realized that treating a poor child's illness was only a temporary fix if that child had to return to a life of malnutrition and squalor. This growing awareness stirred a deep-seated desire within him to find a more permanent cure, a cure not for a single person, but for the societal diseases of injustice and oppression that he witnessed firsthand. The true turning point in his life came with his famous motorcycle journey across South America in 1952, a trip he undertook with his friend Alberto Granado. This was not merely a youthful adventure. It was a profound educational experience that exposed him to the raw, unfiltered reality of the continent. They traveled through Argentina, Chile, Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela, witnessing immense natural beauty juxtaposed with shocking human suffering. He saw the back-breaking labor of miners in Chile, the ostracized communities of leprosy patients in Peru, and the deep-rooted poverty of indigenous peoples who had been dispossessed of their lands for centuries. This journey was the crucible in which his abstract sympathies for the poor were forged into a hardened, unwavering political conviction. What he saw on his travels fundamentally changed him. The experience stripped away any remaining naivety and replaced it with a burning anger against the systems he believed were responsible for such widespread misery. He came to see Latin America not as a collection of separate countries, but as a single, unified entity suffering under the same forces of economic imperialism and political corruption. He concluded that the only viable solution was a continent-wide revolution, a radical overthrow of the existing order to create a new, more just society. The young doctor had found his true calling. He would no longer simply treat the symptoms of poverty, but would dedicate his life to fighting its root causes, no matter the personal cost. After his transformative travels, Guevara's path eventually led him to Mexico City in 1955. It was in this bustling metropolis, a haven for political exiles from across Latin America, that he had a fateful encounter. He was introduced to a charismatic and determined Cuban lawyer named Fidel Castro. Castro was in Mexico planning to overthrow the oppressive regime of Fulgencio Batista, the US-backed dictator of Cuba. The two men spoke for hours, and Guevara was immediately captivated by Castro's passion and his clear vision for a liberated Cuba. He saw in Fidel a leader who possessed the will and the plan to turn revolutionary ideals into concrete action. For his part, Castro recognized Guevara's sharp intellect, medical skills, and profound commitment to the cause of the oppressed. This meeting marked the beginning of a historic partnership. Guevara, impressed by Castro's 26th of July movement, quickly abandoned his medical career and enlisted as a combatant, becoming the first to join Castro's guerrilla force. He was no longer just a sympathetic observer. He was now an active participant in the struggle. The bond between them was built on mutual respect and a shared revolutionary ideology. Guevara, who had been searching for a practical way to fight for his beliefs, found his purpose alongside Fidel. He underwent rigorous military training with the other Cuban exiles, preparing for the perilous journey to Cuba to launch their insurrection. His dedication and discipline quickly earned him the respect of his comrades, who began calling him Che, an affectionate Argentine colloquialism. In December 1956, Guevara, Castro, and 80 other revolutionaries sailed from Mexico to Cuba aboard a small, leaky yacht named the Granma. The landing was a disaster. They were ambushed by Batista's army, and only a handful, including Che and Fidel, managed to escape into the dense, rugged terrain of the Sierra Maestra Mountains. It was here, against all odds, that the revolution truly began. Che proved himself to be an exceptional guerrilla fighter, brave, strategic, and utterly ruthless when necessary. He was not only a soldier, but also the troop doctor, tending to the wounded and enforcing strict discipline. He established training camps, set up workshops to make grenades, and even started a revolutionary newspaper to spread their message. His role was absolutely crucial to the eventual victory of the revolution. He rose through the ranks to become Castro's most trusted commander, a commandante of the rebel army. He led his column in several key battles, with his most significant military achievement being the capture of the city of Santa Clara in late 1958. This victory was the final nail in the coffin for the Batista regime, severing its supply lines and causing the army's morale to collapse completely. On January 1st, 1959, Batista fled Cuba, and the revolutionaries marched triumphantly into Havana. Che Guevara, the Argentine doctor who had set out on a motorcycle years earlier, had become one of the principal architects of the Cuban Revolution, a symbol of its success and a powerful figure in the new government. Following the triumph of the Cuban Revolution, Che Guevara took on several key roles in the new government, demonstrating that his skills extended beyond the battlefield. He was appointed head of the La Cabana fortress prison, where he oversaw the revolutionary tribunals and executions of officials from the former Batista regime. This period remains one of the most controversial aspects of his life. He later served as the president of the National Bank and then as the Minister of Industries, tasked with shaping Cuba's new socialist economy. He traveled the world as a diplomat for Cuba, meeting with world leaders and passionately advocating for the cause of anti-imperialism at forums like the United Nations. Despite these powerful positions, Che grew restless with the day-to-day tasks of governance and bureaucracy. His heart remained set on a grander vision, sparking a worldwide revolution. He believed that the Cuban model was not just for Cuba, but could be replicated across the developing world, in Africa, Asia, and especially Latin America. He famously articulated his FOCO theory of guerrilla warfare, which proposed that a small dedicated band of revolutionaries could create the conditions for a mass uprising, even without broad popular support at the outset. He felt that the best way to protect the Cuban Revolution from its powerful enemies, particularly the United States, was to create 2, 3, many Vietnams, to bog down imperialist forces in multiple conflicts around the globe. This burning desire to be on the front lines of the global struggle eventually led him to leave his comfortable life in Cuba behind. In 1965, he disappeared from public life in Cuba, leaving behind a farewell letter to Fidel Castro in which he renounced his Cuban citizenship and all his government posts to dedicate himself to fomenting revolution abroad. His first attempt took him to the Congo in Africa, where he hoped to support a Marxist-inspired rebellion against the government. The mission was a complete failure. Che found himself frustrated by the lack of discipline among the local fighters, the internal conflicts within the rebellion's leadership, and his own inability to understand the complex local culture and politics. After months of hardship and with no success, a disillusioned Che was forced to withdraw, viewing the experience as a profound and humbling defeat. Undeterred by the failure in Africa, he set his sights on his home continent of South America. His chosen destination was Bolivia, which he believed was ripe for revolution due to its extreme poverty and political instability. In late 1966, he arrived in the Bolivian jungle with a small band of Cuban and Bolivian guerrillas to establish a new revolutionary front. However, the mission was plagued with problems from the very beginning. The local peasantry was suspicious and unwilling to join his cause. The Bolivian Communist Party offered no support, and his group was isolated and short on supplies. The Bolivian army, aided by US military advisors and CIA operatives, relentlessly hunted them down, systematically closing in on the small, beleaguered guerrilla force. The end for Che Guevara came on October 8, 1967. After months of being pursued through the harsh Bolivian wilderness, his small guerrilla band was finally cornered and defeated. Wounded in combat, Che was captured by the Bolivian army. He was taken to a dilapidated schoolhouse in the nearby village of La Higuera. The decision on his fate was made swiftly by the Bolivian High Command, with the approval of their CIA advisors. They wanted to avoid a public trial that could turn Che into a martyr. The following day, on October 9th, he was executed by a Bolivian soldier. His death marked the tragic end of his revolutionary quest, but it was also the beginning of his transformation into a legendary, almost mythical figure. The legacy of Che Guevara is profoundly complex and deeply divisive. For millions around the world, especially among the young and the disenfranchised, he remains a powerful hero. He is seen as the ultimate symbol of rebellion against oppression, a selfless idealist who sacrificed a life of comfort to fight and die for the cause of the poor and powerless. His unwavering commitment to his principles, his courage in the face of overwhelming odds, and his fierce anti-imperialist stance have made him an icon of revolution and social justice. People admire him for standing up to powerful nations and for dedicating his life to a vision of a more equitable world, seeing him as a martyr for a noble cause. However, there is another, much darker view of Che. For his critics and for the victims of the regimes he helped install, he is not a hero, but a ruthless fanatic. They point to his role in overseeing the executions at La Habana prison, his rigid and authoritarian approach to governance, and his advocacy for armed struggle that often disregarded the human cost. He is seen as a key figure in the establishment of a totalitarian state in Cuba that suppressed dissent and denied basic freedoms. To them, he was not a liberator, but a cold-hearted ideologue who was willing to use violence and terror to impose his political vision, regardless of the consequences for ordinary people who stood in his way. Ultimately, Che Guevara's most enduring legacy might be his image. The famous photograph taken by Alberto Corda, known as Guerrillero Heroico, has become one of the most reproduced images in history. It has been transformed into a global symbol, appearing on everything from t-shirts and posters to murals and protest banners. For many who wear or display it, the image has been detached from the complex and controversial history of the man himself. It has become a universal shorthand for rebellion, counterculture, and the fight against the establishment. Whether seen as a saint or a sinner, Che's intense and defiant gaze continues to captivate the world, representing a timeless and powerful yearning for radical change.